Prepare to embark on a thrilling journey because this meta story will always leave you on the edge of your seat with some of the greatest plot twists ever written. The story starts with a young man reading the last chapter of the web novel 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, or Tesa for short. His name is Dokja. He was often misinterpreted since his Korean name implied he was an only child, reader, or individualist. His father named him to make him strong and independent. But he's been lonely and single his whole life. That's who he is in a nutshell. Dokja was a 28-year-old man. He went to a third-rate college and worked as a contractor at a big company's branch. On the subway that day, Dokja was reading a novel on his phone when suddenly a woman approached him and told him he might get sucked into his phone. As he lifted his gaze, his eyes fell upon a familiar face. It was none other than Sanga Yu, the girl from the HR department. So he greeted her with a hello. He asked Sanga if she was going home, and she said yes. Sanga then sat beside him, saying she got lucky her team manager was away on a business trip. Dokja flinched the moment Sanga sat next to him. Dokja couldn't believe he had run into Sanga, the most popular girl at work. He thought guys from every part of the company were waiting in line to take her home. He asked if she typically took the train home. It turns out that Sanga usually take a bike to work, but because her bike got stolen, so she got no choice but to take the train. Dokja thought that after he took a closer look at her, he could see why all the guys were crazy about her. Dokja didn't care about that because his life differed from Sanga's. On the ride, Dokja reading his novel while Sanga learned Spanish. She notices it, so she asks about it. That startled him, so he immediately put his phone away. Still, she caught a glimpse of it. She is excited to learn that Dokja was reading, as she claims that she likes Murakami Haruki and Raymond Carver. Dokja thought that even if he told her, she probably wouldn't know. He didn't think there was any way he could say to her what he was reading. He likes to read web novels, and even though he's not proud of his hobby, Tesa is a story that means a lot to him. Today, Tesa was about to end, and it is explained that it was a 10-year-long epic story that began in Dokja's teens and ended in his adulthood. Dokja was reading it at times when he was bullied, when he failed his exams and ended up at a third-rate college, and when bad luck got him stationed on the front line during his military service, and until today when he was a mere worker who got transferred multiple times. It was a fantastic serial consisting of 3,149 episodes. The first few episodes gained traction with the readers, but by chapter 50, Dokja was the only one reading it. He assumed it was a story written just for him because he was the only one reading it. Since he couldn't afford a donation, Dokja left a comment to thank the author. Realizing that Sanga was still waiting for his answer, he swiftly changed the topic to their contract with the company, which would end soon. But then he realized that Sanga was promoted to a full-time employee last month due to her diligence, which he didn't. If she were to be a character in a novel, she would be the heroine. He wondered if he could be the protagonist in a different genre, and if the genre of his life wasn't non-fiction but fantasy. If one thing was certain, it was that the genre of his life was non-fiction, and he was no protagonist in this genre. He was merely a reader, so he had to live his own life. That, in turn, inspired Sanga to do the same and pursue her happiness. Dokja was relieved he managed to change the topic. Suddenly, he received a message from a sender, TLS 123, saying thank you. He pondered whether or not it may be Tesa's creator. The sender appreciated Kim Dokja's time and effort in reading his novel. He asked Kim Dokja to give him his email address to show his gratitude. A few moments passed, and he finally received the gift the sender was talking about. The writer said that Tesa would start charging for content at 7 p.m. It was 6:55 p.m., so he had 5 minutes left. He checked his phone to see if the information was there, but nothing was there. He thought it was strange. He wondered if they removed the novels without warning when they became paid content. Suddenly the subway lights went out, and the trains broke down with a loud crashing sound. Then a loud hissing sound followed as the train slowly stopped. Everyone on board thought it was a terrorist attack. While Dokja is trying to ensure that Sanga is alright, she is fortunately. Dokja reassures her that it's probably nothing as she tightly grips his arm, while at that exact moment, he looks at his phone to see that it's precisely 7 p.m. He was deep in thought when the conductor suddenly announced that everyone must evacuate the train immediately. Dokja and Sanga were worried about what was happening when a bright flash appeared in the middle of the cabin, and a system message suddenly came out of nowhere. The message said that the free service of the 8612 planetary system was over and that the main scenario would start now. At that point, his life took a different turn. As Dokja watched the scene unfolding before him, the opening lines of a very familiar story kept crossing his mind. In disbelief, Dokja couldn't fathom the possibility of this being true. Yet when suddenly, a straw-clad hairy creature appeared in midair. Dokja was too odd to be a fairy, too evil to be an angel, and too innocent to be a devil. Dokja stared in awe as people murmured as they looked at the Dokja. Some people wondered what the Dokja was saying because it spoke in a language they didn't understand, while others thought it was a trick. Some people even thought the Dokja was ugly. At that moment, Dokja was the only one who knew what was happening. He was sure it was the same Dokja as the one in the first line of Tesa. This creature brought the tragedy that went on for thousands of chapters throughout the novel. And right now, his hand trembled as he gripped his phone tightly as he tried to comprehend reality. The Dokja voice echoed through the cabin, asking if they could hear him. He then explained that there had been a slight malfunction with the language patch. Then a passenger asked the Dokja what he was up to and wondered if he was a filmmaker. Another passenger also said that he had to go to his interview. And then 3 more people approached the Dokja and told him to start the train. Among the commotion, the Dokja told them to remain quiet and listen. But the uproar grew louder. Dokja was sure he knew how the story would end because everything that was going on the subway train was starkly similar to Tesa. Dokja knew he had to stop them but didn't know how. He told Sanga to stay where she was when more passengers complained. Finally, the Dokja lost his rage and burst many people's heads, telling them they weren't in a movie, dream, book, or even the actual world, leaving the other passengers terrified. Even though Dokja didn't want to accept it, this was true. His doubt and disbelief slowly disappeared as he watched the blood spread quickly across the floor. It was like Neo in the Matrix, who suspected reality, observing, questioning, and then eventually being convinced. At that moment, Dokja had to admit it. Even when he didn't know why, there were no doubts about it. Tesa had become a reality. With a menacing face, the Dokja pointed out that everyone had been living well until now. They could breathe, eat, and have babies without paying for it. He then declared that it was all over and that nothing was free in life. The passengers' faces showed fear and worry because they didn't know what to do. Suddenly, one man was brave enough to confront the Dokja even after what he had witnessed. The man asked the Dokja if what he wanted was money. Dokja and Sanga recognized him as Myongo-han. Myongo asked him how much money he wanted, 1 million or 2 million. He claimed he would pay as much as he could if Dokja let him go. The Dokja said that money was just a plant fiber symbolizing an agreement forged among humans to be of value, but it was limited to the boundaries of their space-time. Then with a swift motion, Dokja snapped his fingers, causing the check to burst into flames and warning Myongo that he would blow his head up if he ever pulled a stunt like that again. After that, the Dokja said that there was no time for chit-chat, adding that their debt was piling up as they spoke, so he wouldn't bother explaining it further to the passengers, saying it would be faster for them to learn by themselves. Suddenly, the Dokja horns grew longer, and a status window immediately popped up, stating that channel BI7623 had opened and the constellations were logging in. A system message appeared in front of everybody, including Dokja. He glared at the screen as it announced that the main scenario had arrived. The main scenario was called Prove Your Value, and the goal was to kill at least one living thing. Before vanishing in a blinding flash, the Dokja wishes everyone good luck and says with a nasty smirk that he expects an amazing story. People reacted differently after it. Some people tried to get off the train, while others called the police. Sanga tried to do the latter, but no one answered, so she asked Dokja what they should do. Dokja told her to calm down and reminded her that she had played the game that the development team was making, in which only a few people had survived the end of the world. Sanga was confused and asked him what that had to do with anything. He advised her to picture themselves as players in the game, noting that they would need to learn the game rules to succeed. But even after Dokja's explanation, Sanga still didn't understand what he was talking about. Inside the train cabin, corpses scattered about the floor like garbage, trembling office workers covered in blood, and an old lady praying fervently in her seat. At that moment, reality and fantasy have indeed overlapped. Dokja closed his eyes, trying to think of a way to survive. Suddenly a man was trying to calm everyone down, telling them to stop what they were doing. The man explained that even a small commotion could lead to heavy casualties in a national emergency like this one, so he declared that he would take charge of the situation. The people weren't happy, asking the man who he was. The man showed them his identity card and introduced himself as Hyunseong Lee, an army lieutenant in Unit 6502. Dokja knew this would become a national emergency, so he wasn't surprised. But it was something else that took him by surprise. Dokja knew him. He had never seen him, but he knew him by name. He was one of the supporting characters in Tesa. Dokja couldn't believe his own eyes as he saw a character from Tesa come to life. He believed Hyunseong originally appeared after the first scenario and began wondering why he appeared now. He thought he would comprehend what was happening if he could reread the novel. Someone shouted that the PM was speaking live. A high-level emergency was declared. The entire cabin was silent as the Prime Minister spoke. But soon, his head exploded, leaving everybody shocked. And not long after, the Dokja showed up and reminded everyone that it wasn't a joke like terrorism. He decided to increase the difficulty. He'll cut it to 10 minutes, and if no one dies in 5 minutes, he'll kill everyone in the cabin. Dokja thought everything was happening exactly as he remembered it. The events were unfolding precisely the same as the beginning of Tesa, but he couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. Dokja wondered why the main character had yet to appear since Hyunseong Lee, one of the major supporting characters, had already appeared. He thought that if he remembered correctly, the main character should be appearing soon. Suddenly, the cabin behind them exploded, and people yelled in fright. Somebody shouted that someone was murdering everyone. A young man was ready to block the door when he hit an invisible wall. A system message popped up saying no one could leave or enter the cabin until the scenario was finished. On the live broadcast, the Dokja chuckled about how lively certain cabins were while others were still starting. The Dokja showed them an example of what would happen if they didn't do anything in the next 5 minutes, and a live stream of students in their class appeared. After the time limit ended one by one, Tipung Girls' high school girls were shown being murdered in the live feed. Dokja shut his eyes closed as he couldn't watch it anymore. However, one girl named Jae-lee, a sophomore in Class B, was seen strangling her friend, leaving her as the sole survivor of Channel Bay 23515. The Dokja wickedly laughed while saying it was fun. Dokja was enraged seeing it, while the people inside the train trembled with fear, including Sangha. Dokja remained composed, wondering why the main character had yet to appear. Events that he was familiar with, as well as events he didn't know, were unfolding simultaneously. He rechecked his phone to see if the Tesa was in there, but it was no longer available. Finally, a thought came to his mind, and he immediately checked the email that had been sent to him, where he found an attachment. Dokja was taken aback by what he found. It was the novel he'd been looking for. He was surprised because the author sent him the novel as a gift, wondering whether it was illegal. A window appeared stating that each character in Tesa receives a particular attribute and a skill linked to it. He attempted to open his attributes window many times, but he couldn't do it. Dokja pondered what was going on, thinking that if he could not access his attributes window, he would not be able to discover his attributes and skill. He then decided to read the attached file. Upon doing so, a system message stated that his attribute had been activated and that his reading speed would be increased. Dokja was taken aback when he discovered his attribute was an accelerated reading speed. It only took him less than a minute to read the opening chapter of Tesa. He was grateful for his attribute, and once he realized he was in cabin 3807, he knew why he had felt so uneasy. The events that unfolded around him were different from what he remembered because the protagonist of the Tesa was in cabin 3707, which is located behind the one he is in. He then wondered what happened to the people in cabin 3807 in the story. He remembered the line that said the protagonist took a peek at the confusion unfolding in subway cabin 3807, and only 2 people survived. Suddenly, Namwoon smacked off a person he was arguing with, which caught everyone's attention. Sangha was trembling in fear while asking Dokja if they should try to stop them. Dokja was worried because he knew only 2 people would survive in cabin 3807, which he was currently in. Those survivors were Hyunseong Lee and the teenager who was beating up an older woman, and he was called Namwoon Kim. Dokja thought that Sangha would most likely die, except for Hyunseong Lee and Namwoon Kim, and everyone in the cabin would die, including himself. Han tried to stop Namwoon from beating up the nameless older woman, imploring him to respect the elders. Namwoon pointed his finger at the screen that shows how people are killing each other, and stated that the army would not save them and that someone had to die, adding that they had to decide who would die. He also commented that he knew exactly what they were thinking, that they thought they were above all, and that killing others just to survive is animalistic behavior. He said he usually would agree with them, but their current situation differed. Namwoon said they had no choice but to kill or be killed, and no one could blame them when their lives were in danger. He told them to think carefully because the world they knew was over, and they needed to learn new rules for this new world. Namwoon put a wedge in the crack and broke the morals that held society together. Hyunseong cringed while the people beat up the older woman, unable to make himself look at them. If no one died within the next 5 minutes, everyone in there would die. They now held the most primitive emotion that a living creature could have. Dokja was standing by like someone watching something happening in another world. The grandmother, whose name he doesn't know, wasn't meant to live in the original scenario. If he carelessly meddled with the course of the story, there may be less of the original plot left for him to work with. but he questioned if it was fair to stand by and watch her die so that he could live. Sangha rushed at them, but Dokja immediately stopped her, reminding her not to be so reckless, as it was dangerous. Sangha knew this, but she could not help herself. Dokja thought that some people were destined to shine regardless of their genre, but Sangha could not change the course of the story because she was not the heroine in this world. Dokja told Sangha to stay there, begging her to do as he said. He told her that if she listened to him this once, he would promise he would not ever bother her again. Dokja exhaled, thinking that it was too early for him to interfere, and that it was not part of his plan. He did not interfere sooner, not because he was afraid of Namwoon or the others or because he condoned their savage ways, but he was waiting for something. The time limit for the scenario dropped to 7 minutes and 32 seconds, and right at that moment, a loud bang can be heard in the back cabin. Then smoke fills the air inside. He was waiting for that, so Dokja dashed toward the commotion with only one person in mind. Dokja tackled Namwoon, causing him to be thrown away on the other side of the cabin. Namwoon was enraged, asking Dokja what his problem was, but Dokja paid him no attention, instead looking for something else. He located the young boy with the insect box. He grabbed the box and gave the youngster a bug before he took the rest. Dokja yelled, telling them to cease what they were doing, saying that killing the old lady did not mean they would be able to live. Everyone immediately turned to him. Dokja said Dokkaebi told them to kill one person. He wondered whom they would murder next. Namwoon chuckled and said they would kill losers like Dokja. Dokja rebukes him, questioned why they had to risk their lives when there was an alternative to survive without being a murderer. He reminded them that the scenario did not say they had to kill a human being, saying that it stated they had to kill one or more living organisms. Dokja held a bug in his hand and showed it up. Right now, Dokja was facing the explosive madness that tried to kill the grandmother, yet a smile emerged on his face. He questioned if he had always been this kind of person. He killed the bug in his palm, completed the first kill mission, and was rewarded with 100 coins. He then threw away the remaining insects, which caused the people to panic. Namwoon asked why Dokja had thrown away the remaining insects, adding that Dokja could have just handed them over. Dokja said that there were only 3 bugs left in the box. Namwoon Kim laughed hard and asked him if he had thrown the bugs because not all passengers could live. Dokja gave a positive answer. Namwoon told him not to be ridiculous, saying that no one with a right mind would pull a stunt like this for such a stupid reason. Namwoon, with a wildly sinister expression, told him to be honest. He also mentioned that Dokja wanted to watch them fight for their lives. Dokja thought that Namwoon was the kind of person who was cruel, rampant, and enjoying situations like this. A character profile window popped up. It indicates the overall information of Namwoon. Upon viewing the profile window, he learned Namwoon's attribute was an edgelord. Most teen edgelords in the Tesa could not handle the nightmare that became a reality and committed suicide, but Namwoon was different. He was the delusion demon, Kim Namwoon. The young man, who later became known by this nickname, wasn't an ordinary teen. He'd been anticipating the end of the world for so long that he adjusted to it very quickly. 2 minutes and 59 seconds remained for the main scenario. Cabin 3707 engulfed in flames. A mysterious man dressed in black is the sole survivor, and his silhouette can be seen as he tries to enter cabin 3807. Meanwhile, Dokja and Namwoon look at each other awkwardly. Then Namwoon offered to collaborate after Dokja's response piqued his interest. A system message popped up, stating that Dokja has developed a deeper understanding of Namwoon's character. Dokja immediately rejected his offer as he preferred to be alone. He realized that if he hadn't read Tesa, he probably would have made a different choice. But as a reader, Dokja was aware of Namwoon's character and future. As Namwoon expressed his disappointment for his refusal, and then he approached the older woman who was barely breathing. But Dokja grabbed Namwoon's hand to stop him. Namwoon asked Dokja if he was trying to act like a hero now, and declared that he had made him sick. He is furious, and when he has had enough, he hits Dokja. But he instinctively uses his power, and the hit barely misses Dokja's head. That, in turn, angered Dokja, but another attack came his way again, which he blocked with his hand. He noticed that Namwoon's skill of the edgelord attribute, Grimdark Awakening Level 1, was activated. Fortunately, the next attack is missing again, hitting the ground. Realizing how strong his newly awakened power was, Namwoon laughed hysterically. Dokja thought it was probably why the protagonist had still recruited him, even though he was a psychopath. A system message then popped up, stating that Dokja's understanding of Namwoon Kim had increased again. Another system message appeared, stating that Dokja had unlocked level 1 of his skill called Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. He was confused about what sort of skill it was. People started noticing the loud hit as the fight between Dokja and Namwoon continued. Yet, he could not hit Dokja even once. Once this skill was activated, a message stated that Namwoon would hit his right shoulder. Dokja immediately dodges it. Yet another message warning of an impending face punch from Namwoon. The gap between his fist and Dokja's face was mere inches. When Dokja fell to the floor, Namwoon's anger peaked. He realized that he could only dodge Namwoon's attacks, and retaliating wasn't possible. He thought that he just needed to hold on a little longer. Dokja informed Namwoon that there were only 2 minutes left before the main scenario ended. Dokja noticed that the old lady was still lying on the ground and thought that if she died, Namwoon would clear the scenario. Dokja grabbed the grandmother and trying to roll away to prevent Namwoon from succeeding in the scenario. Though, he didn't realize Namwoon was waiting for him to do that to make him vulnerable. Yet thanks to his skill, he knew Namwoon was planning to target his heart, and the only damage Dokja received was a scrape on his shoulder. Namwoon could only stab the floor and watch Dokja carrying the grandmother away. Dokja thought he would die if he lost to Namwoon since he believed only the strongest lived. Rules were the same before the world changed, so he needs to follow the same rule. Namwoon told him to get it over with, as they were running out of time. But Dokja asked him if an insect egg was also considered an organism. Namwoon asked him what he was talking about. Dokja answered him with a yes before taking out the grasshopper's body he had killed earlier from his pocket. There was the sound of something popping, and some fluid spilled out. The disgusting fluid spread over his hand as a message was heard. It informed him that he had killed a living thing and obtained 100 bonus coins as additional compensation. Namwoon is enraged as he attacks him, asking how he is supposed to know the answer. It was an attack that was hard to avoid. A system message then asked Dokja if he wanted a tutorial on coin usage. Still, he chose to skip it since he already knew the contents and invested 2,700 coins in his stamina. As a result, Dokja's stamina rose from level 1 to level 10, and his strength and stamina improved drastically. Namwoon Kim tried to stab Dokja in the heart again, yet it didn't work. Namwoon then immediately backed away, wondering what had happened and how. Staring him dead in the eye, Dokja stated it wasn't him who would die but Namwoon. With less than 1 minute left before the scenario ended, Namwoon Kim tried to attack Dokja relentlessly, yet Dokja didn't flinch. It didn't take long until the duration ended, and not long after, the Dokkaebi appeared and was seemingly quite impressed by the condition they were in. At last, there were 5 survivors at the end of the first main scenario. The 5 survivors were Hyunseong Lee, Sanga Yu, Gilyong Lee, Myunggo Han, and Dokja Kim. As Dokja looks down on Namwoon's body, he remembers how he pleads for help but refuses to help. And as time passes, Namwoon's head explodes, along with other people's heads exploding. Dokja could have saved other people, and he would have been lying if he had said he didn't feel guilty. Yet it was strange how he was able to remain so calm. It felt like he was reading the novel instead of participating. Dokja then notices his reflection in a darkened carriage window and realizes the blood on his face is actually on the window. Ultimately, it has been concluded that killing non-resistant organisms half his coins. He gained 6,200 coins but lost 2,700 to level up his stats. Dokja was finally able to comprehend that the world he once knew was destroyed, and a new world was born, and he was the only reader who knew the ending of this world. The subway train stopped around halfway past Dongho Bridge. Several survivors stood up and looked at the scene outside, the ruined Seoul, and the collapsed buildings. Monsters reminiscent of a giant snake were eating the wreckage of a fighter jet that had crashed into the Han River. Dokja recognized their identity at once, an ichthyosaur. A monster commonly called a sea serpent would later be classified as a 7th grade monster in Tesa. One of the ichthyosaurs looked in his direction, making some people frightened. However, Dokja just looked apathetically at the approaching ichthyosaur, because he knows they couldn't be a threat. The world of Tesa prioritized scenarios over everything else, so they wouldn't be attacked by any creatures unless they were part of the scenario. The Dokkaebi was so happy as he counted the stars. They signified how many constellations had subscribed to his channel. Dokja thought the Dokkaebi was dying of happiness because his channel had 21 viewers, which was considered a lot for a new Dokkaebi. In Tesa, constellations were mysterious beings. They sat watching from the distant nebulas and were the masterminds of this tragedy. In other words, they were the ones who watched the Dokkaebi's channel. In the original story, Namwoon killed almost everyone in that cabin. However, Dokja stopped it, and his thoughts were right as a few constellations were angry at him. As Dokja grabbed Namwoon's knife, he thought about how unbelievable it was as a day ago their positions were opposite. Now constellations were the ones watching him. A system message stated that several constellations admired his scenario and gave him 500 coins. But of course, if there were constellations who hated him, there were also constellations who supported him. Dokja thought that he hoped all the constellations would enjoy the show, as they would pay the admission fee with their lives sooner or later. Sangha then asked Dokja if he was okay, to which Dokja replied that he was sorry, as he hadn't been able to save the grandmother. She was concerned, and was about to say something but decided not to. Dokja asked her what it was, to which she evasively said it was nothing. She then thanked Dokja for throwing the cage toward her. Dokja replied that it was a coincidence and wouldn't happen again. Dokja didn't know what Sangha was thinking, but he was sure she was smart enough to survive the chaos. He felt that she probably understood what he said. Dokja thought that due to his choice, some lived while some died, and he didn't deserve the gratitude of those who survived. 5 survivors are more than he had expected. He then looked at the kid called Jeongli, remembering when he had given him the insect. Knowing it would be dangerous for the kid to survive alone, Dokja asked Gilyong if he wanted to live. When the kid nodded, Dokja told him to team up with him. He thought that it wasn't sympathy that had motivated him, and if he had to use a word to describe it, it would be hypocrisy. A status window pop-up stating that a few constellations are impressed with Dokja's good deeds, so the constellations have gifted him 200 coins. He thought that even though it was a low move to pretend to care, it couldn't be helped because he, too, wanted to live. Considering the events that will follow, Dokja has to get the attention of the constellations now. The Dokkaebi said many interesting things had happened today, adding that the guy in the next cabin was also a total nutcase. Nyongo, the lucky guy, asked the Dokkaebi if he would let them go now. He then further added that they had done everything that the Dokkaebi had asked for. Dokja looked at him, wondering why Myungo was even taking the subway, as he knew that Myungo was very well off. The Dokkaebi wickedly smiled, asking him if he was sure he wanted him to let Myungo go. Still, upon seeing the monsters outside, Myungo was left speechless. The Dokkaebi was impressed that the cabin had many survivors during the first scenario. He then told them that every difficulty deserved a reward, and the award for the first scenario was that constellations could now sponsor them. However, the reaction was natural as Dokja was the only one there who knew about the sponsorship of the constellations. The Dokkaebi told them they were weak and would be killed by even a weak ground mouse, let alone a kruk, if they continued. However, he informed them that there were great beings in this world who pitied them and wished to sponsor them. Dokja had 4 sponsors to choose from: Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, Demonic Judge of Fire, Secretive Plotter, and Prisoner of the Golden Headband. Sangha called out to Dokja, saying that 2 strange options had suddenly appeared. Dokja lied by saying he didn't know anything either to avoid suspicions. He told her to think of it as taking an aptitude test. The sponsor selection was a system in which the constellations who watched them through the Dokkaebi channel chose a human they liked as their avatar. In Dokja's case, 4 constellations wanted to sponsor him as their avatar. However, the constellations kept their actual names secret. Considering the protagonist of Tesa initially had 5 options, 4 wasn't a small number. Dokja knew the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon led Black Cloud. This constellation gave the avatar considerable attack power, and it was the strongest constellation in early scenarios that required power and physicality. However, as this constellation's power was being used more, the mind became corrupted, and the contractor would become a mad murderer. This constellation usually supported edgelord attributes. Dokja felt uneasy and excluded this constellation. Second on the list, Dokja was amazed that the Demonic Judge of Fire was there. He thought that judging from the name, one could assume this constellation was demonic. However, ironically, demonic meant that this constellation wasn't a demon. The words fire and judge indicated that this entity made judgments through the fire, meaning it was Archangel Uriel. Secretive Plotter was Dokja's 3rd choice. He had never seen this option. He might understand the constellation if he read Tesa more. At his last option, Dokja couldn't believe that the Prisoner of the Golden Headband constellation had made an offer so early that he doubted his eyes several times. The Prisoner of the Golden Headband may have sounded negative at first. Still, one had to pay attention to the proper noun, Golden Headband, which is referred to as the smallest prison in the world. Journey to the West fans would know it. The handsome Monkey King with the golden gaze, fiery eyes. The Great Sage, Heaven's Equal, Sun Wukong. Nearing the end of the duration, Dokja chooses not to pick any constellation. His reason is simple. He knew the sponsor contract was never a fair deal and the fact that there was a way to become strong without a constellation. When the sponsor selection had ended, the Dokja declared that someone had made a very interesting choice. At the same time, his eyes stared at Dokja for a moment. He then allowed the survivors to take a short break for 10 minutes while he prepared for the next scenario. When the Dokja disappeared, Dokja told everyone to gather around, which they did so hesitantly. Hyunseong is the first to shake Dokja's hand and introduce himself. As they shook hands, Dokja noticed Hyunseong had a firm grip, but he wasn't surprised. After all, Hyunseong was the tanker in the early stages of Tesa that made Dokja want to recruit him. Hyunseong commended Dokja for his prior actions, saying they would likely be dead without him. Dokja was about to say something when suddenly, Myunggo grabbed his shoulder, asking if he knew him. Dokja said yes and then called him by his name, causing Myunggo to be surprised. He told Dokja that he should call him Mr. Han, but Dokja replied that they weren't at work. Myunggo continued his gibberish, but Dokja told him to shut up, urging him to come to his senses and see what was happening. Dokja realized that not just Myunggo needed a wake-up call. Actually, everyone needed to wake up. He stated that this wasn't a joke and that everyone realized it by now. Hyunseong added that what's happening to them is similar to the novel he read while working the night shift. He still couldn't believe it was real, wondering if it was a dream. He then said it was good that at least one person was sure of what was going on and asked Dokja if he had any ideas of what to do next. Dokja replied that they had to get out of there, causing the survivors to be shocked. A loud roar from the sea monster can be heard through the window. They started complaining that the idea Dokja gave them was crazy when suddenly a loud boom was heard on the other side of the door. They were shocked and wondered what was going on. Dokja wondered if they were already moving on to the next scenario but realized it couldn't be since the Dokja had yet to return. That left him to think that the person on the other side of the door was the sole survivor of subway cabin 3707, and a black boot was aggressively kicking the door from that side. With a grim look in his eyes, Dokja thought it was obvious who that was, the true protagonist of this story. He then convinced Hyunseong they had to leave, saying they would all die before the next scenario if they didn't go while the door was being relentlessly kicked. Hyunseong wasn't sure if their enemy was behind that door. Dokja said that the survivor was the one who killed everyone in his cabin. He then asked if anyone wanted to meet him. Upon hearing this, they immediately started to find their way out. The invisible force field disappeared after the scenario ended, so they needed to find a working door. They still needed to check 3 of the 8 doors in the cabin. The menacing sound of the door being kicked sent fear to everyone, including Dokja, as he stared at the door from the next cabin that was about to break open. Suddenly Sangha found a slightly open door, which Hyunseong found that the door was also broken, but Dokja asserted that it was still the only one they could open. He then glanced at his status window, where he saw that he had 4,700 coins. He thought that using his coins so early on could be dangerous, so Dokja asked Hyunseong to utilize his expertise to open the door. He checked Hyunseong's profile with his skill. Thankfully, his supporting constellation attributes were the same as in the novel. Hyunseong claimed to own one, but he was completely clueless about how to use it. Dokja then told him to imagine himself using it, making Hyunseong doubt if that was all it took. Hyunseong then forced open the door. His biceps swelled as he grabbed the door. It was the appearance of the Great Mountain Push. In fact, Great Mountain Push wasn't a skill but a stigma, and a stigma was a power from the constellation. Dokja carefully used the word skill instead of stigma to avoid suspicions. A system notification then popped up, stating that Hyunseong had begun to trust Dokja, and Dokja's understanding of Hyunseong's character had increased. After the door was opened, Dokja and the others ran towards the bridge. Dokja thought the steel door connected to subway cabin 3707 would break soon, but he remembered that the steel door wasn't the problem. Dokja was shocked to see the Dokja floating in front of them. He was angry because the survivors hadn't listened to him and stayed put. He said he wasn't done preparing for the next scenario. Myunggo hurriedly said they should have stayed inside, clutching his head like it would explode. The Dokja sighed and snapped his fingers, saying he had no choice now that the survivors were outside. A status window then popped up, signaling the start of the second scenario. It was a sub-scenario with E difficulty. The goal was to go through the collapsing bridge and enter Oksu Station in 20 minutes. The reward is 200 coins for clearing the sub-scenario, and failure was mystery penalty. Dokja immediately ran towards the station, but Sangha was troubled and called out to Dokja, saying that the bridge hadn't collapsed. Dokja told her not to worry about it and just run. In fact, Sangha was right. The bridge had yet to be broken. In other words, the bridge was going to be broken. The Dokja said the preparation time was 10 minutes, but they escaped 3 minutes earlier. Dokja looked around. Hyunsung was running first with the kid. He was a natural monster who didn't invest coins in his stats. Yet, the sum of his strength, physique, and agility exceeded 23. The next one was Myungo and then Sanga with him in the rear. He thinks that they might make it in time. Myungo noticed a whirlpool from which a sea monster emerged, a sea serpent or a sea commander from its size. The ichthyosaur roared. Dokja thought that since the ichthyosaur didn't go after avatars early on in the story, it had probably shown up to destroy the bridge. Dokja estimated they had 200 meters remaining and could reach the bridge before it fell at their speed. However, the Dokkaebi wouldn't let them escape so easily, saying it was no fun if the game was too easy, and Dokja had a bad feeling about it. The Dokkaebi said there would be no fun if the game were too easy. He, therefore, intended to make a change. He changed the scenario's difficulty from E to D. While inside the train cabin, a black ether, the wicked thoughts of the dead, can be seen possessing dead bodies and bringing them back to life. And not long after, there was the sound of something chasing them, and Sanga was the first to notice. Zombie-like bodies were coming in huge waves. Some of them were people from the same carriage as them. Hyunseong and the kid managed to arrive at Oksu Station. Still, they were worried for Dokja and the others as zombies now surrounded Dokja, Sanga, and Myungo. A roar could be heard from afar, and as Dokja looked up, he immediately told them to get down. At the same time, the ichthyosaur took a big bite out of the bridge, severing it totally. Sanga was calling Dokja's name as he was struggling to stand up. When he came to his senses, he was surprised to see the state of the bridge, and he hadn't expected Myungo and Sanga to have survived. Dokja noticed that the kid and Hyunseong were shouting something, although he couldn't hear it. He wondered what would happen next when a message suddenly appeared, stating that someone had received the favor of a constellation and activated Deus Ex Machina. Along with it, a brilliant bridge made of light was created among the remnants of the broken Dongho Bridge. It was the bridge of even numbers that could only be crossed by an even number of people. If an odd number of people attempted to cross it, the bridge would collapse. Sanga told Dokja that something had suddenly appeared on her head. Dokja was in awe, wondering if Sanga's supporting constellation risked a huge loss by intervening in a scenario. However, Dokja thought this kind of intervention was rare, even in Tesa. He wondered what kind of a constellation could be supporting her, so he decided to peek at Sanga's character profile. Upon checking her profile, he failed, and that is indicating that she has a special constellation supporting her, and that gave her a mental barrier. Sanga then yelled at him, alerting him to look behind him. Dokja reflexively leaned forward as a familiar bloody fist covered with energy flew through the air, barely missing his head. He then instinctively kicked his attacker, sending him flying a few feet behind as Dokja tried to catch his breath and gather his thought. Dokja immediately knew what had attacked him, a Tier 9 humanoid demon, a demonic people. They were human mutants infected with black ether. Demonic people were no different than zombies, but it was particularly dangerous if their hosts were powerful. Of all people, it had to be Namwoon. Dokja activated his Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint skill, but the character he targeted did not possess consciousness, so his skill was automatically deactivated. In turn, Dokja was late to dodge the attack and got scratched in his left arm. Dokja felt that all they could do now was to get across the bridge of even numbers somehow, but there were 3 of them right now. Dokja turned around and was about to say something when he saw Myungo carrying Sanga. Dokja was dumbfounded. Myungo immediately ran off, and Dokja was so angry he couldn't believe Myungo had left him. A system message then pops up, stating that the secretive plotter was impressed by how easy he is to trick, and the demonic judge of fire was touched by Dokja's selflessness and gifted him 100 coins. He tried to use his character profile skill on Myungo, but it still didn't work. He then realized that his profiling skill didn't work because Sanga and Myungo were not characters in Tesa. With a roar, Zombie Namwoon summoned hordes of zombies to swarm Dokja. The zombies rushed towards him, and Dokja tried to think of a way to cross the bridge while fighting. He had an idea to grab a demon to cross the bridge with him, but he felt it would probably not work. Suddenly a time notification showed only 15 minutes were left until the scenario ended, and the Dokkaebi was watching him casually. Then, the Dokkaebi said that Dokja was doing well and offered constellations to help him, but nobody responded. While Dokja fought with the zombies as hard as he could, his friends watched him with worry. Unfortunately, his body weakened until Dokja was now cornered. If he stepped back, he would fall to the sea, but if he stepped forward, he would have to face the horde of zombies. In the predicament he was facing, he thought that he might die this time. He felt it wouldn't be this hard if only he had one combat skill. Suddenly a system message popped up, stating that Dokja's bookmark skill had been activated. A huge book-like hologram appeared, and he wondered what the bookmark was for upon seeing it. Then the message popped up with a list of bookmarked characters: Delusional Demon Namwoon, Steel Blade Hyunseong Lee, and an empty slot. Dokja thought that he had read over 3,000 episodes of Tesa, but he had never read about the bookmark skill anywhere. However, he still instinctively understood how it worked. And as zombie Namwoon approached him with glowing eyes and a loud roar, followed by the other zombies, Dokja activated bookmark number 1. A system message popped up stating that the activation time had been shortened due to the low understanding of Namwoon's character. Dokja successfully activated Grimdark Awakening level 1, and he gripped his knife tightly as zombie Namwoon launched his attack. Namwoon's silhouette can be seen behind Dokja as he uses this skill to one-hit kill the zombie version of Namwoon. The zombie screamed in agony before slowly saying he didn't want to die. Dokja watched silently as Namwoon's body dropped to the ground. A message stated that his understanding of his character increased before the bookmark skill was deactivated. 10 minutes and 11 seconds remained, but many zombies surrounded Dokja. However, from the beginning, Dokja had no intention of taking care of them alone. It was a little late, but the protagonist should appear at any moment. In the distance, there was a loud explosion Dokja had been waiting for. The zombies realized that something was strange and started turning around. However, it was too late. The zombies were thrown away in a straight line from the stationary train as if a tank had rushed through. A man dressed in all black walked calmly in the middle of it all, and Dokja smirked as he saw him. The man in the black robe, known as Yoo Young-hyuk, calmly walked in Dokja's direction, unfazed by the zombies. His menacing glare glowed golden as he asked Dokja who he was. Dokja felt chills down his spine, thinking he wouldn't stand a chance if he had to go up against Yoo Young-hyuk. Dokja immediately activated his profiling skill, and not long after, Young-hyuk raised his hand and grabbed Dokja's neck. Dokja was completely at his mercy as he hovered over the edge of the bridge. Young-hyuk asked him how he was still alive. While Dokja tried to free himself from his grip, he thought about how he was the living proof of the first method in Tesa. Dokja knew him as Young-hyuk, the regressor. He was the person who would start the tragedy that would turn the world on its head. Meanwhile, on the other side of the broken bridge, Hyunseong was attempting to find out what was happening on the other side. However, it wasn't working as there was a barrier, much like the one in the subway, making Sanga worried about Dokja, who was still dangling in the air as Young-hyuk once again asked him his name. That makes him thought that Young-hyuk was really a self-centered protagonist. Finally, Dokja told him his name, to which Young-hyuk replied that his name was strange. But Dokja chose to be a smart-ass, which got him punched in the gut. Dokja was taken aback by the blow as Young-hyuk commended Dokja for his strong body before adding that Dokja had already figured out how to use the coins. When Dokja tried to talk back only to get punched again for it, that made him wonder how Young-hyuk was so strong when they had only cleared one main scenario, and were now clearing a sub-scenario. Young-hyuk then told Dokja to stop talking and answer the questions that were asked of him. Dokja thought this was the worst thing that could happen and hoped it wouldn't ever happen. After 3 regressions, Young-hyuk is Tesa's most dangerous character, as Young-hyuk once again asked if Dokja would comply, and he just calmly replied fine. Young-hyuk then punched him again but was blocked this time. Young-hyuk was surprised that his punch had been blocked. As they stared into each other, Dokja smiled and intentionally mentioned his attribute as a pro gamer before he told Young-hyuk that he was younger than him, so Young-hyuk should show him some respect. Young-hyuk became wary of Dokja because of this. He then asked Dokja if he knew him, to which Dokja replied that he knew him because he worked at a game company. This is a lie because he was a fictional character in Tesa until now. Dokja mentioned that Young-hyuk was pretty famous, and he was one of his fans. Dokja thought that Young-hyuk's fame was just a setting in the novel, but he wasn't lying when he said that he used to be a fan of Young-hyuk. Dokja reflected on his complicated feelings toward the man and realized he had mixed emotions. He had been with Young-hyuk throughout his 3,000 episode journey. Young-hyuk then said that he hadn't heard that in a while, and that he would forgive Dokja for being rude. But Young-hyuk told him that this wouldn't make a difference. Dokja understood, and Young-hyuk mentioned that he had only one question for Dokja, and that is how Dokja managed to survive the subway. He racked his brain to think what he could say to make Young-hyuk let him live. A system message informed Dokja that his understanding of Young-hyuk had increased, and that he had already understood his character. Another system message came up, saying that Dokja had unlocked level 2 of his personal skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, and as he activated his leveled up skill, he was surprised to find out that he could now read Young-hyuk's mind, and he heard in the end that Young-hyuk would kill him if he was a threat. He then smirked, thinking that he could use this skill against Young-hyuk. Dokja then answered Young-hyuk's question by telling him that he had cleared the scenario by killing insects, which surprised Young-hyuk. Dokja went on to say that he was lucky to have seen the kid with the bugs, as he had fallen due to the explosion in the cabin in front of them, leaving Young-hyuk to wonder if the future had changed. Young-hyuk then thought about his ruined cabin with dead bodies on the floor. He thought it might be because he had started out by killing them with an explosion, unlike in his previous runs. Young-hyuk noticed something odd about Dokja. As the world had turned upside down, Dokja was unusually calm. He concluded that Dokja must have killed Namwoon, so he thought Dokja was dangerous. Dokja then told Young-hyuk to let him go if he was done with his questions, telling him to cross the bridge together to Oksu Station because they were running out of time. But Young-hyuk had another thought because everything fits too perfectly. Golden light emanated from his right eye. Dokja knew the skill Young-hyuk was using and was alerted. He thought to himself that the Eye of the Sage was the best way to discover a person's traits and what they were hiding. It was the best detection skill. As Young-hyuk grabbed Dokja with both hands, he wondered why Young-hyuk wasn't using it, but he thought that maybe it was for the best since he also didn't know his attributes or skills. If Young-hyuk found out what they were, he also wanted to know. Suddenly, a system message popped up informing Dokja that his personal skill, the fourth wall, had been activated. It could detect and attack the skill Young-hyuk was using, sending a massive shock to him. With only 2 minutes remaining for the sub-scenario, Young-hyuk aggressively asked what Dokja was. Meanwhile, Dokja was dumbfounded, unable to believe that he had a skill that could block the Eye of the Sage. Young-hyuk thought that he would have to kill Dokja there, and with Dokja who was able to read Young-hyuk's mind, he immediately told him to wait. Dokja was furious at himself for complicating things, knowing Young-hyuk would never believe him. He changed his strategy and reminded Young-hyuk he needed a reliable ally. He further added that Young-hyuk needed help to clear scenario 46. Young-hyuk asked Dokja how he knew that and if he was also a regressor. Dokja responded that it didn't matter who he was right now, but more about what he could do for him. Then Young-hyuk realized that Dokja wasn't a regressor. Otherwise, he would know him. Dokja then told Young-hyuk that he knew the future that Young-hyuk didn't know. When Young-hyuk heard this, he quickly used his skill to find lies, which showed that Dokja was telling the truth. Young-hyuk was shocked and took a few steps back. He thought it couldn't be true and wondered if there was another prophet in Korea besides Anna Croft. Prophet is the only trait in Tesa that lets a character see into the future, and the only one that stops detection skills from working. From what Dokja knew, only one person in the world of Tesa had the prophet trait. Young-hyuk asked Dokja if he could be able to use future sight. Dokja gave a vague answer, and when Young-hyuk asked if he knew he would be there, Dokja said yes. As the city behind them continued to burn and a sea monster swarmed the river, Dokja told Young-hyuk that he knew Young-hyuk had a special power, and that he also knew what would happen in the future. In Dokja's memories, regressors have lived their lives repeatedly, and know what will happen. However, people can influence their futures by changing the present. Dokja then offered to be Young-hyuk's companion so that he could complete his knowledge of the future, and since he was the only one who could read the story, Dokja would act as his prophet. Young-hyuk gritted his teeth as he thought that what Dokja said was true not just for scenario 46 but also for fighting the Zarathustra. However, he was wondering if he could trust Dokja. Young-hyuk thought about it for a long time, and when there were only 40 seconds left until the end of the scenario, he made up his mind and decided to make Dokja his companion. Suddenly Young-hyuk swung Dokja to the bridge and dragged him. Dokja coughed multiple times, telling him to let go, but he kept pulling him. Dokja and Young-hyuk then crossed the broken bridge with the help of the Deus Ex Machina. The zombies were growling. Meanwhile, Sangha, Hyunsung, and Gilyong were waiting for Dokja in the station. And as Young-hyuk keeps dragging Dokja by grabbing the collar of his shirt, Dokja was glad to know that he was safe again. He couldn't believe he could get the regressor to agree with him. Dokja was too tired from focusing too hard, so his omniscient reader's viewpoint skill stopped working on its own. Dokja was a bit anxious that his skill was being deactivated, but he had done everything he could and had convinced Young-hyuk in no time. Dokja thought he was safe because he had already crossed the bridge. Behind the veil, Dokja's friend can be seen as Young-hyuk stopping him and asking him if he is a prophet, which means he can tell his future. Dokja had a bad feeling about this, and true to his instinct, Young-hyuk suddenly lifted him up and walked near the end of the bridge, where a sea monster was ready to devour him. Dokja's face contorted in fear as Young-hyuk asked if he would release him to the sea monster. To himself, Dokja was convinced that Young-hyuk was a psychopath, so he shut his eyes tight. In his mind, he was the only one who truly understood him, and if this Young-hyuk he had read about was the same one. Then Dokja decided to tell him that he had a couple of things to say first, which surprised Young-hyuk. As they stared face to face, Dokja said that since he was willing to team up with Young-hyuk, he should also promise to collaborate with him. Young-hyuk gets what he wants and then asks Dokja for an answer. With a wide grin, Dokja called him an idiot and told him to let him go and go away. Unfortunately, Young-hyuk complies and lets go of his hand, causing Dokja to fall. As Dokja fell with a loud scream, he could see Young-hyuk standing over the edge watching him fall, and from up close, he smiled, saying he believed Dokja was really a prophet. Dokja was stunned, but as he was about to be eaten by the sea monster, he smiled and cursed Young-hyuk. The sea monster closed its mouth with a loud chomping sound, and a notification popped up stating that Dokja had failed to clear the scenario. Inside the sea monster's mouth, Dokja drowned. He was struggling to hold his breath, but he knew he had to keep going, and he couldn't pass out. When Dokja finally reached the stomach along with cars, debris, and dead bodies, he managed to get out of the water, retching and coughing. Dokja thought as he searched his inner pocket with ragged breath that he had made it to the monster's stomach without being torn apart and eaten. When he found his phone, he used the flashlight to look around, and to his horror, he saw a sea of dead bodies, cars, and what used to be part of the bridge. The insides of an ichthyosaur's stomach were more disgusting than he had imagined. Then Dokja swam toward a flat, floating stone and told himself that Young-hyuk was a psychopath. Dokja did understand why Young-hyuk was doing this, though. The weight of this word, companion, was too great for Young-hyuk. Since his failure in the first round of regression, Young-hyuk had never made a real companion. Since all humans were his subordinates or foes to him, this was presumably a test. Dokja understands that Young-hyuk wants him to prove himself to be his equal. As Dokja sat casually on a floating stone, he closed his eyes and played the message log. There were quite a few messages. Additionally, a few constellations wanted to sponsor him. Maybe it was due to the final conversation he had with Young-hyuk. Suddenly, the inside of the sea monster started to shake, indicating that the sea monster was on the move. Dokja was startled as he held the stone tightly. Dokja remembered that, according to Tesa, ichthyosaur's stomach started secreting acid 3 minutes after eating. In other words, Dokja doesn't have a lot of time left. Suddenly, a bright flash appeared behind him, and the Dokja came. Dokja was surprised by his appearance, and then he realized that Dokja was not flustered at all, despite his situation. To which Dokja replied that he had been waiting for him, confusing the Dokja. And as Dokja stared at the Dokja, he thought to himself that not only would he get out of there in one piece, but he would also obtain the power to stand as Young-hyuk's equal. He added that Young-hyuk would have no choice but to accept him as his companion. Meanwhile, at the edge of the bridge, Young-hyuk stood still and watched the sea monster swim for a while before he finally turned around and left. In the sea monster's stomach, Dokja asked Dokja whether he was waiting for him. Dokja said yes. He told the Dokja that he had to take Dokja's coins as a penalty for failing the scenario. The Dokja was even more confused. Then the Dokja asked why coins instead of his life. Dokja said that if the Dokja was going to kill him, the punishment for failing would have said death instead of the mystery penalty. He also said that it just meant that there was room for negotiation. As Dokja watched, the Dokja's eyes turned red. Before, he laughed while saying that it was interesting and was impressed that Dokja had managed to come to such a conclusion from that tiny clue, adding that it was no wonder all the constellations had their eyes on him. The Dokja further told Dokja that the price would be 5,100 coins to save his life. As Dokja looked at the coins he possessed and saw that it was exactly the same amount the Dokja was asking for, he was agitated. Dokja told the Dokja that it was too expensive, and he told Dokja that he could die. And then he relaxingly said that if Dokja didn't want to pay up, he could call it quits there and then. But the Dokja didn't expect Dokja to dare him to kill him. The Dokja was stunned by what Dokja said as he challenged the Dokja again to kill him. Dokja stood frozen with red eyes as Dokja said he couldn't murder him since he was attracting a crowd. Dokja smiled, knowing that the constellations were having fun because of him and that the Dokja wouldn't have come all the way there to kill him. The Dokja was mad and glared menacingly at Dokja, asking him what he was trying to do. Dokja then intentionally calls him low-grade Dokja, Baeyong. This made him stop talking, so Dokja asked Baeyong how his job as a streamer was going. Baeyong was trembling and stuttering as he asked Dokja how a human could know his name. But Dokja didn't pay any attention to him. Instead, he said that his channel isn't doing well because the constellations have been cheap lately. Then, the system sent him a message saying that a few constellations were wondering who he was. Then, another system message said that Dokja's plan shone with the secretive plotter. Dokja whispered at Baeyong, telling him to shut off the channel for a minute so they could talk, to which Baeyong did. After Baeyong had turned off the stream, he asked Dokja how he knew about the star stream when he was only a human. In Dokja's memories, star streamed shows across the cosmos. The ones who signed up were constellations from faraway galaxies, and the actors were people like Dokja. Dokubi were known as streamers and served as mediators between the two groups through their tales. And as Dokja casually sat, he told Baeyong that it didn't matter how he knew, and without giving him a chance for Baeyong to speak, he asked him if he wanted to be the Dokubi king and beat streamers like Dokja and Gildal until he became the best streamer ever, promising to make him the Dokubi king if he signed a contract with him. After hearing what Dokja had said, Baeyong was left astounded, and not long after, he laughed, telling Dokja that he had lost his mind. Baeyong also says that he should have known when Dokja turned down all the offers from the constellations. Baeyong is right that Dokja didn't choose a constellation during the sponsor selection before the sub-scenario. Then Baeyong added that he doesn't know how Dokja knows about the star stream, but he can't accept Dokja's offer because he is a Dokubi and not a constellation, so he can't support him. Dokja explains that he never asked Baeyong to sponsor him, which leaves Baeyong confused. Dokja clarifies that he doesn't want Baeyong's power, but his channel with a stream contract. Dokja mentions the constellation's Dokubi stream contract. Under this contract, a Dokubi will show the avatar of a constellation on its channel in exchange for a certain number of coins. In exchange, the Dokubi who owns the channel gets a cut of the coins the avatar earns. The idea that Dokja is putting forward made Baeyong laugh. Then, with glowing red eyes and anger etched on his face, Baeyong questioned how a mere human dared to mention a star stream contract, especially Dokja, who didn't even have a supporting constellation. Dokja told Baeyong that's why he should take him up on his offer, which left Baeyong puzzled. He asked Baeyong why constellations were even part of star stream feeds. Dokja was aware that there were two big groups. First, there are the ones who like to change stations to get a rush of adrenaline. Second, avatar sponsors are looking for avatars to support. Dokja suggested Baeyong to please thrill or avatar seekers to make his channel successful. Baeyong furiously asks why Dokja cares. Dokja calls Baeyong dense and criticizes his low subscription numbers, then continues to ask Baeyong to consider an avatar who declined a supporting constellation, who is able to outperform all others without a constellation. Hearing it, Baeyong realized. Dokja confirmed that's why he didn't choose a supporting constellation. To end the negotiation, Dokja revealed to him that he knew the constellations might be dying to find out the avatar who tried to challenge the regressor. While Baeyong is freaking out watching his messages, he scolds Dokja and says that avatars with supporting constellations can beat ones that don't have them since that's how it is. Dokja told Baeyong that this was exactly what he would show him from then on. He told Baeyong to shut up and do what he said. Dokja promised Baeyong that he would make him the Dokubi king. Baeyong had a hard time deciding while Dokja had a smile on his face, staring at Baeyong. Baeyong then decided to start the checkout, but Dokja interrupted his request for 5,100 coins, arguing he had yet to fail the scenario. As Dokja rose up, his stone shaking, he claimed he would fulfill the condition then. Dokja ordered Baeyong to open the channel, leaving Baeyong confused. Dokja pointed out that it was going to start soon. Suddenly, a system notification popped up to both of them, stating that a hidden scenario had arrived. Baeyong was shocked, but Dokja remained calm. The hidden scenario Commander Slayer was a difficulty scenario. Kill the Sea Commander Ichthyosaur and escape in 10 days. Failure resulted in death, while completion earned 9,000 coins. When the channel opened, Baeyong deals with the constellations watching his live stream. Meanwhile, Dokja checked the limited items in the Dokubi shop, pondering his options. But Dokja couldn't find the search feature to help him find certain things. A while ago, Dokja had threatened Baeyong to open the Dokubi shop, which was only accessible while the channel was live. That is why Baeyong was suddenly busy explaining. When Baeyong stressed over the constellations, Dokja suddenly asked for help. Baeyong grimly replied that the search button was in the bottom right corner. Dokja proceeded to search for the ancient dragon item, surprising Baeyong. Dokja told Baeyong that he blurted any cool name when asked how he knew about the ancient dragon. Unfortunately, the item was sold out. Dokja felt slightly disappointed as he recalled that, according to Tesa, the owner was a lucky Italian whose wealthy sponsor had bought it for him. Dokja then searched for the Archdemon's eyeball and White Star weapon aura. Dokja's knowledge again surprised Baeyong. Dokja finally bought 4 bags of seahorse mucus and 4 thorns for 800 coins. Baeyong asks Dokja what he plans to do with these things, but Dokja wants him to find out on his own, and Dokja acknowledges Baeyong's warning that there are no refunds. Dokja's idea intrigues the secretive plotter. However, the abyssal black flame dragon dislikes Dokja's every action. Bae-young shut the stream to remind him of his pending offer. Dokja confidently said they'll negotiate the contract after clearing the scenario successfully. Bae-young decided to leave, eager to see if Dokja could clear the hidden scenario. Dokja confidently dismisses him, and Bae-young calls him arrogant. Bae-young wishes Dokja luck as he snaps his fingers, opens his channel, and disappears in a burst of light. Dokja blocked his eyes as Bae-young's light shone right in front of his face. And when Bae-young finally left, he pulled his phone out of his pocket, looked at the time, and realized that it wouldn't be long before the stomach acid came out. Dokja paddles toward the body of the ichthyosaur. As he gets near it, he takes out his small pouch containing some mucus and rubs it on the thorn. Then he turned to see that the stomach acid was finally about to come out. And when the acid is poured into the whole area, Dokja tightens his grip on the thorn, determined to make it out of there alive. He puts all his strength into piercing the stomach of the ichthyosaur. Meanwhile, 4 meteorites have fallen to Earth, causing the entire city to be engulfed in flames while the sea is teeming with sea monsters. Then one of the ichthyosaur flinches and lets out a loud roar as the stomach acids inside its body start swirling. The acid burns everything, including dead bodies. Still, despite the chaos, Dokja manages to climb up using the thorns and stay away from the acid. Dokja huffs and pants, wondering how much time has passed. Doubts creep into his mind as he questions if he overestimated himself. In reality, he's just an ordinary reader and not the story's protagonist as light starts fading away from his eyes. Dokja blinks, feeling a wave of sleepiness wash over him. Dokja thinks it's not a dream, but he wishes it were. The world before wasn't wonderful either, but at least he didn't have to risk his life in a gigantic fish's gut. As the body of the ichthyosaur dries up, suddenly, blinding lights of static appear, illuminating the scene. Dokja remains in place, still gripping the thorn firmly, huffing and trembling with exertion. Bae-young appears and is amazed by Dokja's survival skills. A system notification pops up, indicating that several constellations are impressed by Dokja's abilities to survive, and as a result, they have gifted him 100 coins. On the 4th day of the hidden scenario, Bae-young expresses his surprise at Dokja's unexpected use of the thorns. However, Dokja loses consciousness and falls, his body thudding on the ground. Along with it, the hidden scenario also ended with the ichthyosaur dead. As a prize, 9,000 coins have been given to Dokja. He was the first to successfully hunt down a Tier 7 sea monster, so he got 1,000 coins as an achievement reward. Dokja lies inside the ichthyosaur's body, huffing and catching his breath, relieved that he managed to survive. While Bae-young explains that stone hogs live on shores and consume little sea creatures. Their distinctive thorns puncture and dehydrate prey. He stares at the thorn embedded in the ichthyosaur's body, expressing surprise that someone would utilize it in such a manner. A system notice shows that some constellations smile knowingly and understand Dokja's decision. Some constellations demand that Dokja announce his plans so they know what he is up to. Bae-young helped Dokja sit and said he didn't know the hammer seahorse's mucus could guard against the ichthyosaur's stomach acid. Dokja covered himself with the hammer seahorse's mucus before the stone hog's thorn took effect. He quenched his hunger by consuming the bodily fluid of the ichthyosaur, which had been channeled through the thorn. As a result, he absorbed the creature's strength, increasing his stamina from 11 to 12. Then Dokja explains that hammer seahorses create a particular mucus to protect themselves against ichthyosaurs, their natural predators. This peculiar mucus helped Dokja survive in the acid, but it still hurt him. Dokja's pain is partially nullified by his fourth wall skill. Bae-young is thrilled by Dokja's survival drama and asks the constellations whether they feel the same. Dokja stood up and told Bae-young to open the Dokkaebi shop. Later, Dokja pierces the wall with one of his thorns and discovers the ichthyosaur's nucleus, shocking Bae-young. Dokja grabs the nucleus and tells Bae-young he'll sell it. He tells Bae-young to list it on the Dokkaebi auction house, specifying that he will only accept broken faith for the ichthyosaur's nucleus. Bae-young informs the constellations that they will return after the commercials, much to Dokja's annoyance. Next thing Dokja knew, he was staring at the fully written contract in front of him. Bae-young's decision is solidified by witnessing Dokja successfully clear the hidden scenario. Dokja looks at Bae-young, finding it surprising that he's getting a better deal than he expected, except for one crucial clause missing in the contract. Bae-young asks if Dokja means a seal, but they can agree verbally since a stream contract is soul-bound. Dokja looks at Bae-young in disbelief, informing him that the missing part in the contract is the ratio. Bae-young awkwardly chuckles and offers a 50/50 portion, promising not to charge Dokja for channel usage. Dokja, being smart, refuses his offer. Bae-young tries to tell Dokja that the 50/50 split is the standard in the business, but Dokja says he has no constellations to back him up, adding that they have to pay a big fee to the Dokubi when they give coins to an avatar who doesn't belong to any constellations. Dokja confidently says that Bae-young has already made a lot of money because of him, which makes Bae-young flinch. Casually, Dokja declares that he will take all the coins for himself, leaving Bae-young shocked. And when they stared face to face, Bae-young was infuriated while Dokja just smiled and insisted that Bae-young would be content with just the commission. He stayed firm in his choice not to give Bae-young even one coin. Bae-young protests Dokja's proposal, calling it absurd. He offers a compromise of 70%, but Dokja insists on taking all the coins or finding another channel, hinting at a potential partnership with Gildal. Dokja reminds Bae-young that the advertisements will end soon and points out that the constellations are expressing discontent. Under mounting pressure, Bae-young reluctantly accepts Dokja's terms. Dokja then makes another request. When Bae-young asks him what it is, Dokja smiles and nonchalantly requests a contract fee of 5,000 coins. After signing the contract, Dokja exits the ichthyosaur's body and emerges from the water. He swims towards the edge of the river panting and huffing, feeling the relief of breathing fresh air for the first time in 4 days. Earlier, Dokja had expected to complete the task within 2 days, but acknowledging that he completed the task in 4 days is a good achievement, especially considering it took Young-hyuk 4 days on his 4th round. Additionally, Dokja is happy that he could sign a streaming contract with Bae-young and earn more coins. He could still remember how his face scrunched up in shock when he asked for 5,000 coins. Dokja stood up, contemplating his irony. He remembers never getting anyone to sign anything. However, reading Tesa made him extraordinary. He resolves to get new clothes after realizing they're in a mess. Then a notification appears stating that his 4th wall skill is still activated. A few minutes ago, Dokja revealed a system error to Bae-young, unable to access his attribute window. Bae-young doubted it, attempting to interfere but got electrocuted by Dokja's skill, blocking his access. In the present moment, Dokja smirks, feeling a sense of pride as he doesn't anticipate his skill blocking even the interference of a Dokubi. However, Dokja is taken aback when he steps into the area of the second main scenario. Not long after he enters the main scenario, he is immediately exposed to a poisonous fog. A system notification warns him that the scenario area is very dangerous, and that he should hold his breath and quickly go underground. As the abyssal black flame dragon smiles wickedly, Dokja realizes that the true game has just begun. Dokja mentally prepares himself for the upcoming trials as the empty street is covered with poisonous gas. Then a loud roar can be heard as a giant rhinoceros and a giant praying mantis are engaged in a fight. Meanwhile, in a convenience store, Dokja finds clothes to wear and is currently collecting the food supplies he needs for the second main scenario. Upon gathering enough food he needed, Dokja decides that he should head underground now, as the effect of the item he used to breathe is almost gone. Alain Monkey's lungs is the name of the item he's using right now. If he takes a bite out of it, it can clean poisonous chemicals for 20 minutes. Suddenly, Dokja hears someone calling for help. He stops for a moment and decides to check it out. Upon seeing a lady crawling, he couldn't believe that there was someone who had survived. Dokja immediately helps her by carrying her on his back. He rushes to find shelter as the purifying effect he used is about to expire. While running, Dokja thinks that Oksu Station is already destroyed because it is above ground. So, according to him, the next station nearest to there is an underground station called Gumho Station. However, when they arrive there, they find the entrance blocked. Dokja thinks that maybe the other side of the station is open when the woman tells him suddenly that exit 4 is a safe zone. Meanwhile, at exit number 4, a few people are about to close the entry when Dokja inserts a thorn to stop it from closing. The people are taken aback and move back. Dokja's actions surprised the people watching the door, so he told them in a firm voice to open it. This made them stutter and tell him to go away. Dokja tells them that there is a person who is hurt, but the people inside still refuse to let them in. Dokja wondered if there had been a development in the novel like that. Dokja had no option left, so he grabbed the thorn and forced the roll-up door to open, causing the door to rattle while the people inside were screaming out of fear. As he entered the safety zone, the others made a run for it. Dokja was unimpressed as he saw them run. After he rested the lady against the wall, he instructed her to put the Alain Monkey's lungs item into her mouth, explaining that it wouldn't fully heal her but would neutralize the poison. Dokja stared at her, pondering the possibility of finding another character like her in the novel. He mentioned that if this had been the original book, there was a good chance she would have died in that position. He felt tempted to see the lady's character profile, but his attention was interrupted as the survivors returned, accompanied by a new individual. The man arrogantly questioned Dokja about his identity, to which Dokja calmly replied that he was Kim Dokja. The man became angry and clarified that he had asked about the kind of person Dokja was. Meanwhile, one of the survivors noticed the woman, and the man identified her as the girl from the outcast group. The man inquired if she hadn't returned with them, but his companion couldn't provide a straightforward answer. It suddenly dawned on the man why his companion could not respond. His companion had attempted to take advantage of her. The companion chuckled awkwardly and apologized to Kalsu for jumping first. Dokja wondered if the novel had a Kalsu. If he couldn't remember Kalsu, he assumed the character wasn't important. Because destruction is happening, all sorts of crimes seem so cliched. One of the survivors demanded that Dokja hand over the girl, but their attention was diverted when they noticed the food Dokja had. Cholsu instructed Dokja to leave the food behind and get out of there if he wanted to live. Dokja reflected on how people in real life often fit into cliches and realized that the situation was not going well. Suddenly, a system notification appeared, indicating that the Constellations was angry with the thugs and grew furious, witnessing the injustice unfolding before his eyes. And soon after, with the Constellations' request, a bounty hunter scenario appeared. Dokja started to reach for the thorn, and as he stood up, he contemplated that the situation might not be too bad for him regarding rewards, but it would be unfortunate for those of them. As Cholsu hit his brass knuckle against each other, he warned Dokja to leave immediately, or he would truly kill him. Dokja analyzed the F-rated sub-scenario Eliminate the Grunts. The criteria were to defeat the goons in 5 minutes, but the reward and failure were unknown. Dokja left the woman at the corner and delivered a powerful punch to Cholsu's face from his right side, sending him flying and crashing against the wall. The thugs, witnessing this, surrounded Dokja cautiously, unsure of his identity. Stamina, health, and agility differences significantly influence fight outcomes. Dokja's 33 total level was far superior to the thugs' single-digit stats. Ultimately, Dokja sends them lying to the floor because he keeps targeting their legs. Cholsu were wary as Dokja approached him. His face was swollen as Dokja read his character profile. Dokja was surprised that Cholsu had chosen Monarch of the Small Fries in his supporting constellation. Then he asked if Cholsu was affiliated with the Choldo group. Cholsu was surprised and asked if Dokja recognized him. Dokja remembers Cholsu as the most terrible person in Gumho Station. He wondered why Choldo was still alive because, according to the novel, he was supposed to have been killed by Younghyuk. Dokja was surprised when Cholsu implied that he had also taken lives in the past. Chelsea mentioned that they had a similarity. When Dokja heard what Cholsu said, he thought back to what had happened before, when he chose to throw the bugs or watch Namwoon's death. Then, the thought of being a murderer crossed his mind. However, thanks to his fourth wall skill, Dokja could see through and negate the effect of any bluffs or deceptive statements made by Cholsu. Dokja then swiftly pierced Cholsu's wrist. Cholsu was screaming as Dokja asserted that Cholsu was not in a position to talk. Dokja knew this constellation was a masochist who enjoyed seeing his avatar beaten, so he kicked and punched Cholsu while his friends watched. Until someone begged him to stop, Dokja turned around and thought humans were weak as he looked at the woman sitting unconsciously. Then his mind wondered why such weak humans could do something so violent. He pondered whether it was because the world was in chaos or due to instinct. Dokja sternly asked Cholsu why he had done it, and Cholsu stared silently at him. Cholsu then cursed, telling Dokja to just kill him. Dokja was surprised, realizing that Cholsu wasn't acting solely on instinct. As he saw his bloody face, sorrow was there even before the world ended, just like Dokja. With only 10 seconds remaining until the scenario ended, Dokja stood up and contemplated the possibility that Cholsu might not be entirely mistaken. Acting on his thoughts, Dokja kicked Cholsu, followed by a loud crack. A system notification suddenly appeared, informing Dokja that he had fulfilled all the conditions required to clear the scenario, earning him 300 coins. As he thought about the ruined world around him, Dokja acknowledged the need to adapt to this new existence. One man remarked to him as cold-blooded when looking at Cholsu, who was bleeding and unconscious. Determined to rescue the woman, Dokja lifted her onto his back and instructed the remaining people to take him to the group. People inside Gumho Station were surprised to see a group of people coming down the stairs, with half of them injured. Then Dokja heard someone call his name. From afar, Dokja could see his friends from the subway, and Sangha called out his name. Gilyong was the first to sprint and hugged him, followed by Sangha and Hyunsung. Hyun-sung apologized for leaving Dokja behind, but Dokja understood because Hyun-sung had no choice. Hyun-sung revealed that Young-hyuk was right when he told Hyun-sung that Dokja is probably alive. When Dokja asked where Young-hyuk was, apparently, he left the station yesterday. Only then Dokja understood Chuldu group members were still alive because Young-hyuk left the station early. As he and Sangha watched people helping each other, he realized Young-hyuk had become a monster who controlled everything. Dokja knew Young-hyuk left because he wanted to pursue his goal, but he was still the one who would tie up loose ends. Dokja unknowingly spoke his mind out loud, and when his friend heard him, Dokja told them to ignore it as it was his habit. The secretive plotter is glad by it. When Dokja averted the conversation and asked about Myunggo, a group of men suddenly intruded. Dokja became alerted when he saw Myunggo yell while pointing his finger at him. He was the same man who left him behind on the bridge a few days ago, and he was telling everybody Dokja was pure evil, and that he should go. Suddenly a hand grabbed Myunggo's shoulder, and a slim man appeared among them. As the man introduced him as In Ho-chan, Dokja immediately recognized the name, but he needed to remember where. As he introduced himself as Kim Dokja, he could tell just by looking into his eyes that this guy had a sponsor. Dokja then squeezed his thorn tightly as he thought they were going to make him pay for beating half of them to death, but to his surprise, he was applauded because he had saved them. When In-ho gathered everyone and informed them that Dokja had brought food, people started to talk while grinning at Dokja. Upon welcoming Dokja to the station with a fake smile and fisted palm, Dokja realized In-ho's future had been decided. A little while later, Hyun-sung told him that there were 86 people residing in Gumho Station, which was a lot fewer than Dokja expected. Hyun-sung explained that they were mostly people from the cabin and nearby station. It makes Dokja realize that everyone inside is a murderer. With a defeated look, Hyun-sung said that people in the station is divided into major and minor group. In the major group, there is Myunggo and the one who embraced his ideas. They were the influential figures. In contrast, the minor group sought protection. On the other side of the station, Myunggo and In-ho were talking to the crowd, but In-ho's glance was pointed toward Dokja. Meanwhile, on Dokja's side, Hyun-sung explained that people have been assigned to scavenge for food outside because the stock is running low, including Heroine, the woman Dokja had saved. Dokja then noticed that Hyun-sung didn't join the major group, but he felt something was odd about the majors and decided that the minors were where he belonged. Hyun-sung criticized himself for being a hypocrite, worrying about right and wrong when the world was doomed. Dokja immediately stopped him from rambling by tapping his right chest while saying that it's better to worry about right and wrong, even if you're a hypocrite. Hyun-sung was touched by what he said, but before he could respond, In-ho interrupted them and asked to speak with Dokja. Later, In-ho wanted Dokja to join his group while Hyun-sung yawned behind him. He offered Dokja a high position and a promise to lead the group together, making Dokja wonder what if he refused. In-ho laughed and said he hadn't thought about it. He then said that with his power, he should have felt obligated to lead the people. Dokja sees through his trick and remains silent. In-ho continued to ask for his cooperation and nothing else before asking Dokja to see the other people suffering because they lacked food. Dokja stood silently, his gaze fixated on the glowing exit sign above. A moment later, Hyun-sung asked Dokja if he had to refuse like that, so Dokja asked him back whether or not he wanted Dokja to join the majors. Hyun-sung clearly refused that. He kept thinking about how In-ho had asked Dokja to find him again if he changed his mind. Dokja just nonchalantly ignores it while offering his friends food for dinner. Suddenly, someone called them out, and people started to approach them. As the crowd grew, so did the number of people who stared at them. Then they complained that Dokja kept all the food they had collected for himself. They yelled at him to let In-ho be in charge of the food and ensure everyone got an equal amount. Dokja was shocked by how different it was from the truth. When Dokja thought about the most dangerous type of person in the post-apocalyptic world is not someone like Chulsu. Then, he saw In-ho through the crowd. Finally, he remembers In-ho from Gumho Station is the most dangerous person because he takes advantage of people's sorrow to gain power. In-ho is basically telling Dokja to choose between becoming a hero by sharing his food or becoming a villain by keeping it to himself. Dokja was silently fuming as he held his bag of food tightly. In the end, a new notification stated that he had entered the second scenario area. It also instructed them to locate the trigger point and proceed from there.